Hi. This is an attempt to recreate the events of Elizabeth Stride's murder on Berner Street in 1888 during the Jack the Ripper series. I just want to say a couple of things. This was really complicated to put together. There's a lot of different people to incorporate. Some of the timelines, as stated, either in the press or at the inquest, will create paradoxes. For example, Fanny Mortimer says she's standing here at 12:45 when she sees Goldstein go past, but that's the same time that Schwartz is supposed to be following Broad Shoulders down this street and sees an altercation between Broad Shoulders and Stride. But Fanny Mortimer didn't see any of that, so they can't both have happened at 12:45. What I've attempted to do in building this recreation is I start with Dr. Blackwell because he says he arrived here at 1:16. I can measure the distance back to his residence. I use an average walking speed of 3.1 miles per hour, so I can estimate what time he must have left if he arrived at 1:16. We know his assistant has to cover that same distance, and the assistant arrives here at a point in time that we can link up with some other witnesses who say that, oh, the assistant arrived 3 minutes after I did. So we can start piecing some of these events together, either because we know the duration that they walked or traveled. We can work out then the time of that journey. And quite often we can link one end, either the start of the journey or the end of the journey, to some other person's journey, and they're linked through a statement of a duration. We're actually really, really bad at doing durations. I had a look in the research literature on our accuracy, and I just want to show you this because this is kind of interesting. When people give an estimate of a temporal duration that's relatively short, under an hour basically, we tend to actually overestimate how long we actually waited. So, as an example, if somebody says, I waited 5 minutes, the average amount of time they actually waited is around 3 minutes and 37 seconds. So they've overestimated the true duration. And in fact, when you start looking at the individual variation, it ranges from 1 minute and 38 seconds up to 15 minutes and 6 seconds. I want to make this clear. That means somebody waited 15 minutes and estimated they only waited 5. These aren't very common. For example, waiting a minute, roughly 1.5 minutes, and they thought they waited 5 when asked about it later. On average, it's about a 3.5 minute true duration. So anytime a witness tells me so-and-so arrived 5 minutes after I got there, I use this average true duration. So the idea is that we're taking into account the fact that we're actually really rubbish at estimating temporal durations. We're also really bad at estimating exactly what time of day it is without looking at a watch. And many of the people in Victorian London did not own watches. They were expensive. So, by doing this, I've been able to go through all of the events, and starting with Dr. Blackwell's stated 1:16 arrival, I start chaining everything together as best I can using these average walking speeds and having a look at how well those testimonies will chain together when I convert those stated duration using this table to the estimated one. There's a collection of them that all go together quite nicely, and that's all I have to do. Use the journey time and the duration times. That gets us Dr. Blackwell. It links in the police arrival. It links in the time the runners must have happened to pull in Spooner and the arrival of the assistant eventually. One of our Facebook members, George did a recreation of how long it would take Deemschutz to poke around and prod, get off his cart, determine that it was a body, not a sack of something. And he worked that out to a minute and something. I've used that duration as to how long between Deemschutz's arrival here and when the runners start heading out on to look for things. That changes with that. James Brown, we can then chain to the runners that go past him because he said it was 15 minutes earlier when he was at the Chandler shop. I convert that to something like 12 minutes and something through that charted table that I showed you. And at that time, he thinks he sees Stride at this location, so I have to get her here. When P.C. Smith patrols Burner Street, Stride is thought to be spotted in this area, but she moves on before Fanny Mortimer comes out, and Fanny Mortimer says she comes out just after P.C. Smith has gone past. So I have Stride move off to here. She's eventually spotted by James Brown. She ends up going back to here, not seen by Fanny Mortimer, so she has to go back here after Fanny Mortimer goes inside, and then the Schwartz incident occurs, and so on. Most events get tied in pretty well and linked to Dr. Blackwell's watch. The times shown up here reflect his watch, not witness statements, although they're all very close. They're all within 10 minutes. And events like Goldstein and Broad Shoulders, I've roughly placed them in to correspond with Fanny Mortimer either being or not being on her doorstep. You'll see that Pikeman I have run off this way. That's simply because Schwartz, who goes this way, notices at some point Pikeman's not following him, and I just wanted to get Pikeman out of the way before I removed his marker. So it doesn't really matter what goes on there. Anyway, to keep this short, I shall just start this now, and here we go. So P.C. Smith is doing his rounds, and I've included all of these courts and alleyways because he's supposed to, and I've based his patrol speed to complete this presented route within the stated time. That I've had him patrol there in the opposite direction as to the little blue line I drew because it just works better. I think this is where he updates his time of his patrol. He spots Stride on this passage through Burner Street, so I've got Stride there. I do have him patrolling in where the crime scene was because he has to end up there. Stride moves off when he passed. That was Morris Eagle in the orange. Fanny Mortimer has now come out shortly after P.C. Smith's path. James Brown heads off to the Chandler shop. He waits a couple of minutes. Goldstein passes. James Brown is inside, so he wouldn't see him. James Brown goes home, sees Stride. At some point, Stride is going to leave this location, and Fanny Mortimer's gone in. She didn't necessarily go because Fanny went in. I just moved her at that point. Any time after that would be fine. P.C. Smith has passed. He doesn't report seeing her again. Here comes Schwartz and Broad Shoulders. Pikeman scares Schwartz. Now, if Broad Shoulders has killed Stride, we can see that P.C. Smith is nowhere near. He might not have heard any of that. And he would have missed Schwartz because he was in here. Deemschutz shows up. He waits a minute. Here go the runners. They grab Spooner. They come back. We know there's a delay before the police get there. These runners go off and find them. They don't see P.C. Smith. They see these fellows. And then this fellow goes off to fetch the doctor. And P.C. Smith has now arrived. We can see, here comes the assistant. I'd like to point out that Deemschutz actually does arrive at 1 o'clock. And his arrival is all tied to working backwards from Dr. Blackwell. I haven't set it so that he had to be there at 1. It's based upon the calculation of journeys. And there's Dr. Blackwell, and we're done.